For decades, Area 51 did not officially exist, not on public maps, not in government statements, and not in documents available to ordinary citizens, even though it sat in southern Nevada near a dry lake bed known as Groom Lake, surrounded by restricted land and some of the most tightly controlled airspace in the United States. Long before the base was acknowledged, pilots were warned not to fly overhead, and airspace violations were treated with a seriousness that stood out even in a region already dominated by military training ranges. From the ground, the landscape offered little explanation for this level of control. Roads led toward the area and then stopped without signage that invited questions. The terrain itself was empty enough that most travelers never noticed where access quietly ended. What made Area 51 unusual was not that it was secret, but how consistently it stayed outside everyday awareness. There were no dramatic barriers visible from a distance, no public-facing structures that demanded attention. Instead, there was absence of information, of confirmation, of explanation. Even those authorized to work at the base did not drive there. They boarded unmarked white planes in Las Vegas, operated by an airline known as Janet, a real but deliberately unadvertised operation that flew employees in and out on a daily schedule. The planes had no public route listings, no visible branding, and no announcements that explained where they were going. For the people on board, secrecy was not an event. It was part of the commute. Employees arrived at the airport like anyone else, passed through familiar terminals, boarded quietly, and disappeared into restricted airspace. At the end of the day, they returned home, often without being able to describe where they had been or what they had done. Lifelong non-disclosure agreements ensured that silence continued long after employment ended. For families, this meant knowing where someone worked in the broadest sense, but not knowing anything specific. For the system, it meant continuity without exposure. For years, the U.S. government neither confirmed nor denied that the base existed. This was not an oversight or a temporary position. It was a sustained absence of acknowledgment that lasted through multiple administrations and decades of technological change. That silence only ended in 2013, when the CIA released documents in response to a Freedom of Information Act request first filed in 2005. The documents confirmed what many already suspected: Area 51 was real, and it had been used primarily for the development and testing of experimental aircraft. The confirmation did not include images, operational details, or timelines beyond what was necessary. It did not address rumors directly. It simply acknowledged the base and moved on. That moment was quieter than many expected. There was no press conference, no public tour, no dramatic shift in policy. The admission arrived late, in documents that required effort to find and context to understand. For some, it closed a long-standing question. For others, it raised a different one. If this could remain unacknowledged for so long, what else might operate the same way? Much of the speculation surrounding Area 51 had grown during periods when unfamiliar aircraft were being tested far from public view. In the Cold War era and later in the 1980s and 1990s, sightings of unusual shapes in the sky fueled theories that filled the gap left by official silence. Some of those sightings were later understood to involve early stealth aircraft, designs that looked unfamiliar because they were meant to be difficult to detect. In that sense, secrecy didn't point to something otherworldly. It pointed to technology that was simply ahead of public awareness. Over time, the stories surrounding Area 51 became less about specific claims and more about what secrecy itself implied. The base turned into a symbol not because of what was proven to be inside it, but because of how long it operated without public acknowledgement. It demonstrated that large-scale projects could exist without explanation, without visibility, and without public participation, and that this could continue for decades without disruption. What often goes unnoticed is how ordinary that process was for the people involved. There were no public rituals marking entry or exit. No visible signs of extraordinary purpose. People showed up, followed procedures, did their jobs, and went home. The system did not rely on mystery to function. It relied on routine. Secrecy was maintained not through fear, but through repetition and agreement. When the base was finally acknowledged, the world adjusted quickly. Life outside the restricted area continued unchanged. Flights still passed nearby, just not overhead. Employees still commuted. Projects continued. The acknowledgment did not collapse trust or confirm fears. It simply reduced the unknown to a manageable size and allowed the system to continue operating. Area 51 does not need stories of extraterrestrials, time travel, or hidden alliances to remain unsettling. Its significance lies in something simpler and more grounded. It shows how little information is required for something important to function efficiently, and how easily secrecy becomes normalized when it is presented as routine. It illustrates that absence of explanation does not always signal danger, but it does change how people relate to the systems around them. What remains after the facts are accounted for is not a question about what is hidden inside a specific base, but a broader realization about scale and distance. Area 51 is not unique because it is mysterious. It is notable because it is ordinary in its secrecy. It exists as an example of how entire operations can function quietly, legally, and continuously, without requiring most people to know they exist at all. And once that realization settles, the story stops being about one place in the desert and becomes about something closer to home, how many other systems operate the same way, not because they are hiding something extraordinary, but because the world they support does not require our attention in order to keep moving. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more amazing stories on our channel. See you soon.